Good evening, everyone. With it being 6:31, I would like to call this meeting to order. And I just wanted to start out this meeting by mentioning some exciting news we had this morning at our Francis Howell North. We broke ground on it. We are so excited about what this means for all of our district, as well as putting millions of dollars into our local economy. Saying that, I would like to invite S.M. Wilson to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Jen Joles for our special recognitions.
Thank you, Ms. Lang. For our first recognition, I'd like to invite Ms. Phyllis Paisley, Executive Director of the Missouri Alliance for Arts Education, to the podium.
Thank you so much. Good evening to the esteemed members of the Board of Education, parents, students, and members of the Francis Howell community. I thank you for the opportunity to come before you this evening. I am Phyllis Paisley, Executive Director of the Missouri Alliance for Arts Education, a nonprofit service organization uniting those engaged in arts education throughout Missouri. To learn more about our organization, you can visit our website, www.moaae.org. MAAE also celebrates Missouri arts educators who are entrusted with the responsibility of nurturing Missouri's leaders of tomorrow through the arts. Each year, we receive nominations to recognize excellence in arts education. We honor districts of distinction, community and governmental advocates, innovation and creativity in teaching, and others. But tonight, I am here to honor and to recognize an outstanding school leader and to celebrate the recipient of the 2021 MAAE Administrator of the Year Award, Michelle Ridlin. I'm not done. I've got lots to say about Michelle. Michelle Ridlin is not only a leader within Francis Howell, but also a leader within professional arts education organizations at the local, state, and national levels. She advocates for content-specific professional development and new learning in arts pedagogy. She promotes innovation and expansion of arts programming, new course development, and is a proponent for the use of instructional strategies, including STEAM, arts integration, and choice-based art. Michelle also works with local and state-level partners, uniting educators and nonprofit organizations from across the region in a collaborative community of support. Michelle's passion for the arts, for teaching and learning in all subject areas, and her work to gain resources to help each teacher meet the needs of each and every student are just part of the reasons that we are here to honor her this evening. Michelle Ridlin embodies what we want other leaders to emulate, harnessing the incredible power of the arts to transform learning, to change lives, enrich communities, and develop skills for lifelong success. So it is my honor, on behalf of the Missouri Alliance for Arts Education, to present MAAE's 2021 Award for Administrator of the Year to Francis Howell's own Michelle Ridlin. Congratulations.
Thank you, Ms. Paisley. And for our next recognition, I'd like to ask Dr. Will Vanderpool to come forward.
Thank you, Board of Education and Superintendent Dr. Hoven, for giving us the opportunity to celebrate our nurses tonight. Over the past year, they've been integral in allowing us to fulfill our mission to educate kids and keep our community safe. Next slide. Oh, I got the clicker. Thanks, Laura. Let's start by acknowledging that our nurses continue to do the right work for our kids. We saw other healthcare providers need to restrict access based on need, but that was not an option for our clinics, and the nurses continue to see students on a daily basis. The stats you see are through April and have grown since, and our nurses have over 100,000 visits this year in their clinic. Thank you, FHSD nurses, for being there for our kids. Now let's reflect a little more deeply on our year and what it has meant for us as a school community to have such a strong and caring group of healthcare providers. We started this journey over a year ago with students coming back in June. In June. Not many districts can say that. This happened because of several people in our community, but I want to stress the work of our nurses. They helped prepare us for this. We had students back in our vacation station and extended school year because the nurses kept us informed and put together common sense processes to keep us safe. They maintained their connection to our county health department by supporting the COVID hotline, was part of our district health and wellness task force for returning, developed safety protocols for the clinics to reopen, and think about how you help everyone feel safe in the one place where you go when you're sick. Supporting contact tracing and answered thousands of questions from staff, parents, and a few from our kids. They could have not done more as a group to support us through the pandemic and keep us safe. Thank you, FHSD nurses, for being there for our kids. Another celebration is the work our nurses did with our COVID testing clinic. They found a way to find time to come over to the building, to this building, and provide testing to the students and staff in the district. This allowed us to quickly identify positive cases and allow people to get the care they needed. The nurses did this work and exposed themselves long before any vaccine was available. Thank you, FHSD nurses, for being there for our kids. So we'd now like to have our nurses come up to be recognized and receive their superintendent certificate. But before I do that, I just want to say how absolutely proud I am and how it touches me every day to know everything you've done for us this year. As teachers in our district, as administrators, there's no way we could have done this without your help. So thank you for being there for us every single day. So come on up, Rachel Arnold. Barb Brommelhorst. Rose Cantrell. Yeah, stay here with me. Rachel, you're supposed to stay up here with us. Stay on up here. Yeah, we got to do this as a group. Amy Corey. Lynn Finnerty. Lori Godby. Sherry Himmich. Rose Holmes. I don't want to. Jackie Rennick. Amy Kelly. Lindsay LeBeau. Brianna LaCroix. Deb Lotus. Heather Mary. Roxanne Monty. Julie Montert. Amy O'Brien. Kathy Paris. Liz Shell. Tammy Hewitt. Cindy Turner. Jill Van Natter. Okay. Thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you. Next, we'll be moving on to patron comments. During patron comments, patrons are invited to address the Board of Education. When I call your name, please come to the podium so everyone can hear. The board is interested in public's concerns and opinions. We do not respond to comments or questions during the meeting. Questions and concerns will be addressed by Dr. Hoven and other appropriate staff members at a later date. Please remember that comments will be limited to 3 minutes each. Per board protocol, comments about personal matters and remarks about or directed at individual employees or students are not allowed. First up, we have Samantha Miller.
Good evening. My name is Samantha Miller. I'm a graduate and voter of the Francis Howell School District. Full disclosure, my mom is Anita Keener. What this administration and most of all board members here today are doing to remove the release time of the FHEA president is awful. This job is a full-time job. I've witnessed this firsthand. I have watched my mom go to work all day, come home, and then continue to work all evening to make this district the best it can be. The president is an advocate for the teachers, students, and this district. I have listened to her inform people why it is important to support public education through taxes. I learned that supporting good board members that support teachers is very important. However, that is not what is happening now. I've worked on many of your campaigns with her, putting flyers together, canvassing, putting up signs big and small. Mr. Lang, I put out signs for you and even worked a polling place for you, all because we believed you supported the teachers. Shame on you. Mrs. Lang, Mr. Lane, Mrs. Stiglich, same story. Shame on you. Mrs. Walker, your first victory party was at my house. We did all the same things for you as well. Shame on you. Support your teachers by supporting the FHEA. People are watching. You all say that you support your teachers and unions. Actions speak louder than words. Thank you.
Next up, we have Liz Poyster.
Hi. I am the proud mom of 2 amazing Francis Howell kids, one at Central Elementary and one at Bryan. What I'm not is a teacher, but I love teachers. I was raised by teachers. I married a teacher. One of my best friends is a teacher, and my kids have been blessed to learn from the very best teachers, most of whom still remember their names, their gifts, and their quirks. I have watched these incredible educators roll with the punches the world has thrown. When a pandemic shut down our buildings last March, I admired our teachers for figuring out what the kids would need to do to continue to learn from home in literally an hour, on top of preparing for parent-teacher conferences. They were creative in making learning from home fun and made sure that my kids knew that they were loved when it felt like the world was on fire. I sat with them when they fretted over whether their kids were okay last spring, when they couldn't hug them. I tried to reassure my friends all summer that surely the district would have health and safety at heart if school even resumed with jammed classrooms incapable of facilitating appropriate distance. They did. And then again, that the district would react quickly when COVID would inevitably ravage the buildings, and that the district valued teacher health over the public image. You see, last year was hard. You know that, but it goes so beyond COVID. Not long ago, our teachers lobbied for a fair pay increase after several years of a freeze, only to be demonized by when they received just a very meager bump. I've emailed many of you and those who sat in those chairs before you, imploring you to just listen to them, our frontliners, our teachers, and you always tell me that you believe they're rock stars and they're superheroes and the foundation of our education system. Yet they feel unappreciated and unheard. I'm not going to stand here and go tit for tat over you as to why each individual instance matters, why they feel that way, and how you should address it, because I don't have time for that. What I have heard from you over and over is that you love them, and you don't understand why they feel the way they feel, so they've got to be wrong. Have you asked them, like in person? They're right here. Do you listen to their responses? They have an advocate and their FHEA president, and you're making it really hard for her to do her job. Whether or not you believe your actions have deepened a divide between this district and its rock stars, that's irrelevant. It's there. Our superheroes are imploring you to listen. They don't feel heard, and they don't think you're in their corner. That's evident by the crowds flooding this boardroom in a pandemic and parking lots full of honking cars outside of central office. The time for your doublespeak has passed. Stop saying one thing when the election box looms and another when you're here. The onus is on you. Fix this or we're gonna lose more of our teachers. Thank you.
Next up, we have Dan Myers.
Okay, I have 2 points I was going to bring up today. The first one I saw on the agenda, there was a discussion on the inclusion and equity curriculum. I wasn't exactly sure what was going on there. It sounds like you may be adding a class, which I would applaud. Good job. Let's see, race and its effects on society, or studying that is. Sorry, I'm a little flustered right now. Her speech is just. So a class on equity and inclusion is important to study its effects on us and the cultural identity of us as Americans. And yes, we're a melting pot, but we should not be colorblind and pretend we are just one homogeneous American culture. Individual customs need to be celebrated, studied, and understood. And study how laws, systems, and we need to study how laws, systems, and business practices affect various groups of people and what we can do to make things better. So please add that class to our curriculum. And regarding the FHEA union president position, as a parent, I've been hearing a lot about what's been going on with it, and I'm kind of confused. Like, why are we changing the status quo from the last few decades? I really have not heard a good reason for it yet. And as a parent, I want my teachers to feel listened to and respected, and happy teachers mean high-performing students. And effectively removing this position takes one more thing away from teachers who have already sacrificed so much. And my final thought on it is, does this change make our district better, or does it make your jobs easier? Thank you.
Next up, we have Sophia Johnson.
Hello everyone, my name is Sophia Johnson and I'm a 5th grader at Becky David Elementary. My mother also teaches 3rd grade at Becky David, and my sister just graduated from Mizzou a few weeks ago with a degree in elementary education. My sister also graduated from Francis Howell North, and we have both had similar experiences in the Francis Howell School District. We are both Black and Palestinian, and sometimes it feels like we are not seen or heard in the classroom because we never see ourselves in the lessons at school or the teachers teaching us. I have not had a non-white teacher, and I'm about to go into 6th grade. My sister also has not had many teachers of color. In fact, she has only had one teacher of color for half a semester the entire time she was in the Francis Howell School District. We students spend so much time in the classroom. How are all students supposed to feel seen if only some students see themselves in the lessons and their teachers? I'm going to read a letter to you that I wrote over a year ago when I was a 4th grader upset because not one lesson was taught about Black history. I wrote the letter to express my feelings. I'd like to share it with you now. Black History Month for me is a very special month. Being Black is a blessing. This year, it hurt me deeply that we did not get to celebrate Black history like we have in the past years. I would like to speak up for future students to make sure we have a diverse curriculum for everybody to enjoy. We should learn about all different cultures, not just African American, but other ones also. It is important for us to acknowledge the past so we do not make history repeat itself in the future. The history we learn in the classroom is not always accurate, and that bothers me and a lot of other students. I wrote this trying to make a change for future grades that go to our school. I know in past grades we have celebrated Black history, but this year I was deeply disappointed we did not. I asked that the Francis Howell School District includes Black history and books with characters that look like all students in our curriculum, and that you consider hiring teachers that are brown and Black so students like me can see themselves in our teachers. We see color, and if you don't see color, you don't see us. Have a good day. Thank you for your time. Sophia Johnson.
Next up, we have Jen Lowery.
Good evening. My name is Jen Lowry, and I'm a parent of 3 students in this district, and I've served as a counselor at Francis Howell High School for the last 18 years. I am here tonight to speak in support of Francis Howell School District's new courses, Black History and Black Literature. I had the honor of serving on the Curriculum Writing Committee for the Black History course. Before becoming a counselor, I taught history for 6 years at a neighboring school district. I taught American history, American government, and world religions. When becoming a teacher, I immediately began to notice what was missing from many of my textbooks: the lives and contributions of women and people of color. Like many teachers, I created lessons to supplement their absence from our textbooks and essentially our history, as my 11th grade American history class at Winsville might be the last history class some of my students took. And I thought, why are all these amazing people put into a supplemental lesson that I have to create? It's like they're an afterthought. And why am I as a woman an afterthought? And more importantly, if I as a teacher felt that way, how must my students be feeling? I wanted my students to understand why it was so important to study history. For only in studying history could we begin to understand our society, yet the society in the history books are mostly one-dimensional, one color, and one gender. History is supposed to help us understand the importance of our lives, but the lives listed in the history books didn't look like me and didn't sound like my students. History helps provide us identity, but books helps us provide us identity, but I couldn't find myself on those pages, and neither could the other girls and students of color in my class. History is supposed to contribute to a moral understanding of our world, but the morals written in the book were not true. You see, the history book talked about how America was built on freedom, but did not mention that it was only freedom for some and oppression for others. It left out fundamental truths about how the American dream and the upper class were created by the backbreaking labor of minorities and subjugation of women. America is a great country, but its foundation and creation has many flaws, and these must be acknowledged in order to better our future and make our society more equitable for all people. The contributions and lives of people deserve to be written into our history books. That is why I came tonight to speak in support of the new courses coming to Francis Howell next year, Black History and Black Literature. Our social studies and language arts curriculum continue to be updated and improved, and hopefully one day soon will be more inclusive of all voices. But until that time is here, I am happy to know that we have 2 courses that focus on the lives and contributions of African Americans to our great American society. These courses do not teach critical race theory and do not attempt to rewrite history. These courses enhance our social studies and language arts curriculum by giving our students historical facts and truths that have often been left out in previous courses. I want all students to be able to see themselves in our history books and hear themselves through American literature. I want them to find themselves on these pages and embrace their identity and the contributions their ancestors have made to this great nation. Thank you, Francis Howell, for your commitment to all of our children by establishing these wonderful courses for next year.
Next up, we have Taylor Anderson McMahon.
Change my microphone a little bit taller than some of the other folks. Hi, everybody. I'm Taylor Anderson McMahon. I'm a proud product of the Francis Howell School District, and I'm coming here in support of the FHEA release position. I began my scholastic journey at Becky David. I continued on to Barnwell and then to North. My grandfather was a principal in the school district and retired after 40 years at Francis Howell. Some of you may know Wayne Gronefeld. And that man is a true inspiration, and I'm proud to call him my grandpa. Unfortunately, there's been a school district change. I have this big, long speech written, but I'm honestly a little frustrated, so I'm going to spitball a minute. There's been a school board change, and it is increasingly more difficult for people like my grandfather to ascend through the ranks and make a big impact on children's lives. Some of the most influential people in my life were teachers right here in the Francis Howell School District. Well, I'm coming up on my 10-year high school reunion, and I've contacted several of my classmates and gotten to know what they've done since graduation. We're talking people like engineers, teachers, politicians, doctors. Looking back, it's apparent to me that the educators that I had in Francis Howell School District were supported. I'd like them to continue to be so through the FHEA. I can't help but think that the lack of support for the FHEA and full-time release position will contribute to the shortfalls that we're seeing. And one person, you guys cannot do two jobs. I don't know how many of you hold more than one job. I promise you there's only a handful, okay? I hold two myself. It's very difficult, okay? Anita's one person, and I can't help but think that you have taken a personal stance on her, which is disgusting. And I have to say that we as alumni are paying attention, and we're all of voting age. I have sisters who just became voting age, and I promise you, as I have done in the past election, I will continue to push for a change of school board members if you do not support this position. This is about money. I'm going to leave that to you because I'm not a financial expert, but it's simple. By affording your teachers support, you afford your students a quality education they deserve. This board has had enough working against it from the state legislature. Don't position yourself in a place that reinforces the vouchers, tax credits, and publicly funded scholarships for private schools and charter schools. This has a long-term negative effect on your board and the students. FHEA has shown up to protect oversight from the state legislature, and you're only harming yourselves by weakening the FHEA. I strongly urge all of you to support the FHEA full-time release. Support this because the alumni of Francis Howell School District are paying attention. We already know about your shortfalls, and we know what antics you're up to.
Your time is up.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Judy Gambino.
Hello, I'm here for a little bit of a different reason, but I felt like it was never too late nor too early. So I'm here to address the board about the face mask mandate on our children. I demand that you unmask these kids. It's child abuse, but let me explain why I feel this way. It's been proven that if children get the virus, they're not super spreaders, and if they get COVID, they get it as a cold. It's proven that the mask does not protect them from the virus. It's like keeping a mosquito from going through a chain link fence. The particles from COVID are smaller than the holes in the mask, and it can still go through it or around it. As an example, Smoke particles are 0.3 to 0.7 microns. COVID particles are 0.0125 microns. With that in mind, smoke particles are larger than COVID particles, and smoke can visibly be seen going through or around the mask. The CDC has provided statistics regarding those that wear masks versus those that don't. In these findings, it stated that those who wear a mask have gotten COVID 76% of the time. Those that wear them sometimes, 14.4% of the time. Those that hardly ever wear them, 3.9% of the time. Keeping our children's faces covered is not scientifically based. It's like sticking a rag in the exhaust of your car and thinking it's going to run right. Our bodies were not made to breathe carbon dioxide all day on the playgrounds, during recess. Keeping our face covers hinders the immune system by not allowing our bodies to be exposed to external biological or environmental impurities. Our immune system will not know how to combat them if we keep the masks on. There's no proof that they work. Cloth masks, bandanas, blue surgical masks, these fabrics were not made to fight off viruses. The vaccine's been released. There's concern with the vaccine's been released, and so I don't understand why you're forcing the masks. There are no mask mandates in the state or in the St. Charles County. None. St. Charles County said, you guys are responsible for the mask mandate. So I'm here today, and I will continue to come back until you unmask our kids.
Next up, we have Christine Frisilla.
Good evening. My name is Christine Frisella. I'm a mother of 3 young boys, 2 currently in the school district. I do want to thank the district for allowing in-person learning this year. Thank you to our nurses to help make it happen. Our kids need to be in school, but they also need to breathe. I believe it is overdue time to make masks a choice. I am aware of what the CDC says. However, they do not have a single study regarding children wearing masks, only on adults. How can we mandate something that has not been proven safe for children? Our children are constantly touching and adjusting their masks. It is spreading pathogens from their hands and increasing the transmission. Fabric masks trap in warm, moist air and become breeding grounds for bacteria, which our children then breathe in all day. Parents are seeing the following side effects: headaches, difficulty concentrating, shortness of breath, anxiety, dizziness, reluctance to go to school, drowsiness, irritability, and increased cases of strep throat, bacterial pneumonia, eye infections, and inflamed gums from the constant mouth breathing. Our normal blood oxygen levels should be at 95 to 100%. The CDC confirms this on their website. So how are our schools measuring this? Are they regularly testing our students to ensure normal oxygen levels? Are they monitoring oxygen levels during PE and recess? I think we already know they are not. Specialists on Healthline say brain cells need an uninterrupted flow of oxygen to function properly. My first grader wears his mask for an average of 480 minutes per day, including PE and outdoor recess. This is not an uninterrupted flow of oxygen. And with all this mentioned above, none of it considers those children that are autistic, have PTSD, anxiety, learning, mental or physical disabilities, or are hearing impaired, all of which make mask wearing even more difficult. The CDC admits on their website, I quote, mask mandates decrease cases by only 1.8%. But here's the good news. Kids have a 99.997% survival rate. Straight from our Francis Howell website this fall, I quote, there's very little, if any, spread of COVID in our buildings, Dr. Nathan Hoven. Our children should have been the first in our county to be unmasked. Currently, statistics show the chance of an asymptomatic child infecting another and then becoming hospitalized is 1 in 42 million. Our children are not affected by COVID. Our children are affected by masks, mentally, physically, and emotionally. Missouri Law Section 171.011 gives school boards the power to establish all needful rules and regulations. Missouri Health Department and our county health department confirmed all quarantine guidelines, including the modified quarantine, were recommendations, not mandates. This board has full power to make their own quarantine guidelines and remove the mask mandates. I urge this board to make masks optional and give the parents back their right to choose what is best for their children. Thank you.
Next up, we have Lori Adams. Is Ms. Adams still here? Okay. Next up, then, we have Eric Zerfus.
Thank you for letting me speak. I have some concerns regarding the budget, as I've always had with the board and decisions that they've made in the past. In the draft FY22 preliminary budget on page 125, there's an added $3 million to the superintendent and board of ed expenditures. This has never been in the budget previously. On page 126, it states the budget includes expenditures for the board that were previously reported with the finance budget. Looking on page 121 of the finance budget, you don't see a $3 million decrease. That doesn't make sense. Why is it? If there is such a change, then it should indicate such. In the FY22 preliminary budget work session, on page 4, there is a $2 million transfer from operating funds to capital projects. Why is this being done when you already have capital fund budget? Where's the explanation? Yet, the preliminary FY21 had an estimated $12.9 million deficit, but now is decreased by 7.8 to just 5 million. Amazing you could find money, I applaud that. So why are you proposing so many other cuts to include the union president? We need more clarity and transparency with respect to the budget and any and all decisions that you're making. Thank you.
We have also received some patron comments via the online submission form, and I will now turn it over to our Director of Communications, Jen Joels, to read those comments aloud.
Thank you, Ms. Lang. Our first comment is from John Heigl. He says, to the board, I am a student at Francis Howell North. I am worried about still having to wear masks. It's troublesome for certain people that have a tough time breathing with the masks on. When I visited my ENT doctor, they had a video going with information about the practice, but also they gave information about COVID from the CDC. They said that people should only wear masks if they are sick or around someone who's actively sick, and this was from the CDC. Do you go by CDC information? If so, why are we not doing what they say? Correct me if I'm wrong, Francis Howell District's policy is to wear masks, and we're not following CDC policy. The example of Texas unmasking and their numbers not going up should be an indication of how things are fine if we don't wear masks. I hope the district and the board will reconsider who they get their information about masking from. After all, COVID has a 99.8% survival rate. The next comment is from Tim Cronin. He says, what is in place for parents to view curriculum to ensure things like critical race theory or elimination of advanced math for freshmen and sophomores is not taking place? Also, to avoid the fiasco Rockwood had, are there disciplinary procedures against any Howell staff who instruct their students to not share what they are being taught with parents? And if we have time for I think there's two more. Todd Wakeland says, the board has two jobs, educate our children and balance a budget. This board has failed on both counts and received a grade of F. Number 1, education consists of reading, writing, and arithmetic. It does not include LGBT education, transgender education, diversity, equity, or critical race theory. It also does not include the mandate that teachers will not say certain words or phrases such as boys and girls because it may offend someone. Reading, writing, and arithmetic. Adding this radical agenda to our children's education is not your mandate, and for this you receive a grade of F. Number 2, balancing a budget consists of knowing how to maintain a building maintenance schedule so we do not have to spend $90 million on a new Francis Howell North. Balancing a budget consists of knowing how to live within your means and not giving teachers a 3% raise you know you cannot afford, and then laying off 52 teachers. Balancing a budget consists of knowing how to plan a future budget without blowing holes in that budget with incompetent projections. This board receives an F for balancing a budget. This board should remember that they work for the parents and citizens and not the teachers union. My tax contributions and all property taxes to this district have gone up every year, and you still cannot balance a budget or refuse to balance a budget. A $12 million deficit is gross negligence on your part. This board has done a disservice to our students and the parents and taxpayers and should resign tonight. The last comment is from Eric Hucker. He says, as a member of MNEA, I would like to express my serious concern with Francis Howell's reported plan to eliminate the FHEA president release position. Having the FHEA release position allows the organization to better serve the needs of its membership and create better, stronger schools for teachers and students alike. Please do not engage in this union-busting action and allow the FHEA president to retain their release position. Thank you.
Next up, we have FHEA.
Good evening. My name is Anita Keener, and I am the president of FHEA. I'd like to start off by introducing 3 special guests from Jefferson City, MNEA President Phil Murray and MNEA Vice President Rebecca McIntosh, and Patrick Layden, an MNEA staff member. Thanks to you for joining us tonight and supporting the FHEA members. Wow, the school year is ramping up, and what a year we have had. We have met challenges that we have never faced before. The teacher support staff and administrators have conquered all challenges thrown at them. We thank you all for that. We thank all retirees that have dedicated their lives to Francis Howell and are now leaving us to start their next chapter. Be safe and have fun. We thank you all, the parents and students, for going the extra mile during this challenging year and for supporting their schools and staff within. We'd like to thank and congratulate our 2019 Missouri Teacher of the Year, Shelley Parks, for successfully getting language in House Bill 432 that supports teachers, employees, and students who are nursing by providing a space in every public school building in the state of Missouri with appropriate accommodations. Wow. How huge is that? We have a lot to be thankful for, and when we work together, there is no challenge that we can't face and defeat. And when we choose not to work together, it hurts all of us. Francis Howell has a history of collaboration. We don't want that to change. Last but not least, I want to thank the FHE Executive Board and building reps for starting a project to raise $30,000 to purchase books to support diverse classroom libraries in Francis Howell School District. Reading comes in all colors, shapes, and sizes, and it is important for our students to see themselves on the shelves of their classroom libraries. FHEA is going to put books in every teacher's classroom library, pre-K through 12th grade, to give all of our students choices that reflect themselves and their families. Look for a GoFundMe account soon. Thank you, and have a great, restful, and safe summer.
Next up, we have FISPA. Okay. Board, I would like a motion to approve the agenda for May 20th, 2021 as presented. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Carries. Board, I would like a motion to approve the April 15th, 2021 minutes as presented. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We will have our MSBA board report.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Missouri School Boards Association's board report for the month of May. We thank you for the opportunity to share some news and information during a few minutes of your board meeting. We begin with a look at this spring's Missouri Assessment Program testing. Because of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on schools this year, the State Board of Education decided to continue with the annual MAP testing, but suspend the use of assessment results for accreditation and accountability purposes. Commissioner of Education Dr. Margie Van Dieven told those attending MSBA's recent legislative forum, it's important to use the assessment results to determine where students are academically as we emerge from COVID-19.
But what we're hearing is that kids are actually doing okay so far on some of the reading. They're at least maintaining. We want to do better. We're focusing on literacy, but they're maintaining. Where they're falling behind is elementary math because of those discrete math skills that are very challenging to do at home a lot of. So in particular, families are more comfortable picking up a book and reading to kids and engaging in those, just like we just said our teachers are. And so some of the discrete math skills, look at that in your districts, look at that in your data right now, and let us know how they're doing, because I'm concerned about that.
Van Dieven says it's important to know what was effective for Missouri students during the pandemic, where inequities exist, and where to apply resources. The MAP testing window is open through May 28th. Meanwhile, school districts in Missouri and throughout the nation are making decisions about how to use significant new funding available through the American Rescue Plan. Part of that new law includes $7.1 billion to help close the digital divide in education and give school districts flexibility to meet local needs. In Missouri, it's estimated that as many as 23% of students do not have adequate internet access at home to allow them to do schoolwork online. The National School Boards Association is asking the Federal Communications Commission to distribute the new federal funding through the current E-rate program. NSBA's Chief Advocacy Officer, Chip Slavin, told those attending MSBA's legislative forum the money will help provide devices and internet connectivity to students, teachers, and others.
It's a complex, complicated problem, but it is not one, if you hear a legislator or a member of Congress saying, well, we just gave you $7 billion, so we fixed the problem. I can assure you we have not fixed the problem. It's a help. It's a blessing to get it. It's going to make a difference for some students temporarily. But long term, this has got to be a key part when we're talking about school infrastructure and when we're talking about equity, that we focus on closing this homework gap.
NSBA is emphasizing to the FCC the very different challenges public schools are facing with the digital divide based on their location, economic situation, and other factors, and that no one solution works for every school district or community. If you were just elected to your school board last month, congratulations and welcome to school board service. You're probably aware state law requires new board members to complete 18.5 hours of training in your first 12 months of service. MSBA's free Certified Board Member Essential Training is approved by the State Board of Education to fulfill that requirement. A member of the Holden R3 Board of Education and a member of the MSBA Board of Directors, Georgia Jarman, believes it's important for newly elected board members to participate in the training as soon as possible.
I think one thing that is important to know is that we've all been to school. And so we believe that we know everything there is to know about school. But the reality is being a school board member is really an involved job. And to do it right, you need to understand the law, you need to understand your role, and you need to understand that everything you do needs to be guided by what's best for kids.
You can complete 10.5 hours of training online and attend virtual or in-person interactive sessions for the remaining 8 hours. See the MSBA website for additional details. MSBA's Igniting Great Ideas Summit is set for June 18th and 19th in Springfield. This event features a wide range of topics and speakers related to school board leadership and current issues facing boards of education. We'll also be holding our June delegate assembly at the summit, when delegates will be electing statewide officers for the coming year. Every MSBA member board is entitled to have at least one voting delegate at the delegate assembly, and we urge your school board to be represented at this important meeting. You can watch video interviews with the candidates for state office posted on the MSBA website. Registration information on the Great Ideas Summit is posted on the MSBA website. Also, mark your calendar for the 2021 MSBA Annual Conference in cooperation with the Missouri Association of School Administrators to be held November 5th through 7th in Kansas City. The event will once again feature more than 100 sessions and workshops, many presented by school leaders from districts throughout the state, all in a new location in downtown Kansas City. In addition, MSBA's Center for Education Safety will be presenting its annual Safe Schools and Colleges Forum on November 4th, also in Kansas City. Get the latest information and guidance on school safety issues for those who govern and work in K-12 schools, colleges, and universities, as well as law enforcement officials. That's it for this month's edition of the MSBA Board Report. Thanks for allowing us to have some time at your board meeting, and so long from Columbia.
Okay, next up we will have a Prop S construction report update. Mr. Klein?
Good evening, Board. It's very nice to see you again from a great morning that we had at Francis Howell North with our groundbreaking. It was nice to have our community members as well as the citizens of Howell as our staff members out there. Tonight's report is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to give a highlight of a few things that are happening, and then I also have some of our friends from SM Wilson and Honer to talk a little bit more about the North Project. So as of this morning, we launched a brand new Prop S website to update the community on what's happening with Prop S. There's level of detail on each building of the different projects that are happening across the Prop S bond projects. The construction bid has been completed for the Francis Howell Central and Sager parking lots, as well as Bryan. That'll be one of the agenda items that you'll be approving tonight, and that work will take place this summer. We've designed new playgrounds for John Weldon, Becky David, and Independence. Those were identified through our study as the most high needs that needed to be replaced for safety of students. So that will also happen and is an agenda item for you to approve this evening. We're continuing our design work with 801 Corporate and our transportation garage. And we are continuing to do our pre-construction walkthroughs for the various buildings across the district that are having security vestibule work that will take place this summer as well. As we transition into looking at the new construction for the Francis Howell North project, we are monitoring different markets that supplies goods for the construction process. As you know, the COVID pandemic has had an impact on many markets. It's hit the construction market as well, and so we are relying on our friends from SM Wilson to help guide us through that process. And so we are continually looking at ways to adjust our schedule and keep ourselves on time and be ahead of things as they happen. I'm going to turn it over now to SM Wilson to talk a little bit about our construction process and how they fit into our Prop S work at Francis Howell North.
Thank you, John. Thank you to the board and the district for inviting us to speak about the Francis Howell North project. To get started, give a brief introduction about our company. SM Wilson is celebrating our 100th anniversary in 2021. We were regionally recognized as a top contractor delivering K-12 construction with a construction management at risk delivery method. We're very excited to be your construction manager for one of the largest K-12 construction manager at risk delivery methods in the state of Missouri. Finally, we want to talk about the construction management and delivery method and talk about some of the benefits. And we want to appreciate the Francis Howell for recognizing the value and the transparency that this delivery method provides the district and the community. First, you were able to choose SM Wilson based upon our qualifications of fee early on at the project. With us being the construction manager for the district and the advisor for the district, we were brought on at the onset of the pre-construction and design time. We are able to work closely with the district and design team through many of the design processes, as well as evaluating constructability topics, sequencing and phasing of the project, site logistics plans, and working through, especially with an active campus and very close neighbors. Some other things that we help provide and work closely and collaborate with the design team is working through many of the cost-saving ideas, as long as evaluating the long lead material items that John has brought up earlier. Once we've worked through the design process, we will actually issue scopes of work. We will publicly bid those work. They will be open aloud and evaluated for completeness. After the bids are received, one benefit of the CMAR, or Construction Management at Risk method, is the concept of a guaranteed maximum price contract. Once the GMP, or guaranteed maximum price contract's in place, we will actually hold all the contracts with the trade subcontractors, alleviating the risk from the district, and we'll take on that risk by holding those contracts and managing as your advisor for construction. Moving away from the CM at risk discussion points, we want to talk about local inclusion. St. Charles County workforce inclusion is a top priority for our team. We are targeting St. Charles County contractors in our bid solicitation process. We're requesting on each of the contractors' bid forms, we're requesting their St. Charles County workforce percentages. With having built more than 100 projects in St. Charles County, we understand how important the community is. With that being said, the neighbors are the top priority also for this project. We will be proactively focused on noise, traffic, and dust control. In the upcoming weeks, our project team will be going door to door with the immediate close neighbors to introduce ourselves and hand out flyers with our contact information and help briefly talk about the project and the immediate schedule. Excuse me. Sorry, as we've been developing our overall schedule, our sequencing, and our traffic control plans, we've been working through that for the last several months. We know that the impacts that it can have on an operating campus and with the neighbors next door to the west and the south. So as we develop those plans, the neighbors and the campus is the top in our forefront of our minds. Finally, in the collaboration with the district, we have a custom website that we can communicate the important information and milestones about the project. Lastly, as we begin construction, we will celebrate the project milestones with the district, which is part of our skilled program that Amanda here is going to tell you a little more about. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Amanda Bonner, and I oversee our skilled program at SM Wilson. The skilled program is a way for us to give back to the community and inspire the future of construction, and turning an inconvenient construction site into an interactive learning environment. Working with your district's staff, administrators, and teachers, we've developed a curriculum for this coming year, including a program called Follow the Build, where your industrial trade students will get to tour and learn about careers, skills, and components of the project throughout the build. We'll have career presentation lunches for your middle school students, introducing them to different career paths in the industry, from accounting to architecture, engineering, and management to the skilled trades. We're also going to have a build and tell program, which allows the Henderson Elementary students the opportunity to get a photo op with heavy equipment and interact with the project team. A student art installation will be for your early childhood centers, where they get to put their hand on a painted I-beam and it becomes memorialized in the project forever. We're excited about these programs and look forward to working with you. We're going to introduce Mark, who's going to go over some of the design.
Thank you. Thank you, Amanda, Jack, and John. Appreciate your time. Hey, board, thank you very much for the opportunity to come and present this exciting project to the board. It was, again, as everyone stated, it was a great day to start to celebrate the groundbreaking today. First thing, I'm going to give you just a very overview of the project, very high level. This here represents the site plan at the north campus. Just for some orientation, I want to show you this is Hackman Road, along with the main entrance at the light, the existing light on Hackman Road. So you will then, in the future, you will come in this boulevard and come through to the high school site, which you can see with the red arrow will be the new front entrance into the new campus. Henderson Elementary to the west, Early Learning Center to the north, for just some orientation purposes. When the traffic comes in at the light, there's parking lot, visitor parking, and then a loop road that would actually go around the entire site with student entrance through the commons in this location right here. As we move around the site, tennis courts are to the south, stadium, along with practice fields to the east. One thing I wanted to kind of talk a little bit to, a couple of things that we've been talking about in a lot of detail with SM Wilson is basically the phasing on the project. There's going to be critical aspects of the project as far as how we work on this campus with a fully active campus for the next few years. First one will be the site demo. As you can see on this site, this represents the final plan, which identifies, it does not identify, but this is where the existing high school campus is currently. So the first phase will be to start demolition and of the area where the tennis courts are currently and the fields. Phase 2 will be the site grading. After the demolition, we will then essentially get into the site grading of the package. Phase 3, we will then begin the construction process of the building itself. Phase 4 will be the parking lot construction. Phase 5 will be moving into the demolition of the existing building, so then consequently basically moving the contractors then essentially move off the site. So those are really the critical aspects of the project as we work through with SM Wilson, which has been a great experience to use their expertise and be able to work through this process. These are fluid, and we're still continue to work through those phasing plans, but they are fluid because every day we look through more detail and things of that nature, but that's the plan as we move forward. Next slide, I would just like to talk just a few minutes about the Francis Howell North design process. A lot of similarities to some of the other projects we've done work with, but basically probably the root of the main goal was to meet with the teachers and the staff to really learn and understand the end users in the building. We find that critical to be able to, we need to understand the end users so they know how they're going to be using that facility. Hours and hours of time that went into those meetings and discussion with the staff as we proceeded. Departments, all the departments are clustered together, meaning the math, science, English, along with all the activity spaces as well. There will be a commons in the center. You'll have the performing arts center in a close proximity, cafeteria, food service, academics, all basically clustered around that, that common space. We've, through those discussions and meetings with the staff, we talked a lot about new creative, innovative spaces for collaboration. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Google-type stairs, or in some cases they refer to them as learning stairs. And these are spaces that basically you have to have stairs in the building, so we've got wider stairs that we can actually put steps on them so that the students between classes, they can collaborate and just have breakout areas where they can kind of sit and converse before and after classes and throughout the course of the day. That also includes some collaboration cubes on every floor. Basically, again, these spaces that students can pull out and actually go into these spaces and have interactive, small interactive time with either other students or other teachers. Another thing you're going to see on the new facility is, due to the 2015 IBC requirements, storm shelters are a requirement in educational facilities. That space is going to be what is currently going to be the Performing Arts Center. So that will be an entire facility. Will have access with the future needs and the future growth of that campus to house those all the students on campus in a storm shelter. Separate bus traffic and car traffic lanes and separation is huge to the site, to keep the site moving and not have gridlock on the site by creating that loop road that will go around the entire building and campus, to keep the buses separate from the student parking. Also, as we've done with all the campuses, the design always allows for future expansion on the campus. We don't want to come back to these campuses and have to really go through a lot of process as there's growth in those districts. And that's 5, 10, 15 years down the road. So future expansion has also been a lot of discussion points. Next slide is a very basic slide. It's probably about all you've really seen on the where we've been doing. You've been hearing about us working on these drawings and work, but you've really not seen a lot. These were just some drawings and some studies that we were doing through some of the property to be able to look at where we're doing some of the berms and things of that nature for the neighborhood. But from there, we've moved into we've got a 3D fly around that I want to share with you of the exterior of the campus. I'm going to just take a couple, 30 seconds or so to just kind of walk you around so you can kind of see what we've been working on and where we're at. If you want to go ahead and. So this, as you come in, this is basically a bird's eye view from Hackman Road. You're going to come in through a boulevard. Basically, the new high school will be to the left. You can see the main entrance as you come into that boulevard. The large mass to the right is the Performing Arts Center, which is also the storm shelter. As you come around, you'll pass the parking area and then the bus loop. As you wrap around, there is the student entrance on the back side of the facility that you would gain access into the main commons. And then the service corridor. As you then continue to come around, you'll see the athletic fields and stadium with the auxiliary gym and the main performing gymnasium, parking lots for the student parking, and then come back to basically a ground level view of the main entrance as you see it as you come into the boulevard. Thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions for us, but it's been a great experience working with us. I'm Wilson. Thank you very much for your time.
Mrs. Lang,
I'd just like to take a minute to say Amy Bonnert, who's the Director of Marketing for SM Wilson, very excited about the learning opportunities for our students to really make this an educational process for them as well. I also had an opportunity today to meet a young man who is currently enrolled at Missouri S&T, who's working as an intern for SM Wilson this summer. So he'll have an opportunity to really get some great firsthand experience by participating with the SM Wilson team on our construction projects. That's very exciting. Jack Kinnamore, who made the presentation this evening, is the project director. So he'll be very much involved in the project throughout. And I believe that our on-site manager is here this evening as well. I believe I saw him earlier. So, but he was there at the groundbreaking today, so we're very excited about that. And then I don't want to forget to mention the enormous contribution that Mr. Jeremy Bettler makes to this whole process. So we have a great team with Mark Ruther and Wade Welch at Honer Architects. They have been our partners for a number of years. They do a fantastic job. We're very excited about SM Wilson. That Jeremy serves as the owner's representative, so he's our voice in this whole process and helps to make sure that all of the decisions that are being made make the most sense for Francis Howell School District. He has a great working relationship with myself and Mr. Klein, and knows a number of board members. So he understands Francis Howell School District and what our priorities are, and he will do a great job of leading us through these construction projects. So I want to thank Mr. Klein for putting all of this together tonight. And it's just great to, a great way to wrap up the day. We began at Francis Howell North with a very exciting groundbreaking, and to have a nice presentation this evening where we first get to see a great visual of what the new school will look like.
Thank you. Questions?
No, I
Comments?
wanted to make a comment if I could. Okay, here. I just want to point out also that we've got a really great team and they cooperate very well together. The one thing that I don't know that we emphasize enough, 2 points. One point is the fact that while all this construction is going on over a $90 million construction project, we're still going to be having an active school campus. There's actually 3 school buildings on this site that are going to be fully functional during this process. So just the logistics to get buses, kids on and off, get construction equipment on and off. I know that the roads have changed a number of times. It's been a great collaboration between our project manager, Jeremy, John Klein, SM Wilson, and our architects. They're all working together to make sure everything gets done. They're working in our best interest. So I want to thank them all for all that they're doing for us. And then the one thing in here, the one little slide about continuing monitoring COVID impacts, everybody that listens to the news or hears anything, they understand what construction pricing is done, what construction availability is done, and just hearing how far out in front they are with, okay, we're going to have to order these beams and different things months in advance, and they're all over it trying to figure out how to make sure we get these things in time, in a timely manner, and the best pricing. It's very rewarding to hear the cooperation and the way that they're working through this project. So I just want to thank everybody there for all the efforts that they're doing on that, and thank you so much.
Yeah, and Mr. Hain, I'll just follow up. It was not we didn't think about it at the time that we chose CMAR, but the CMAR process is really, I think, giving us an opportunity to be much more proactive in ordering those materials, because we're not waiting for 100% drawings before we hire a contractor. So we have an understanding now when drawings are maybe 30%, 40% complete, what we're going to need, and some of that ordering can take place now. So it really turned out to be advantageous in that regard to choose the CMAR process. Allows us to move forward a lot more quickly than we would have in a traditional hard bid process.
Anything else, board? Thank you so much. Board, I would like a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Board, I would like a motion to approve the 2021-2022 FESPA closure document as presented. Ms. Simpkins?
Yes, thanks, Mary Ling. Just wanted to thank everyone who participated in our process. As a team, we were able to come to agreement on all of the topics that were presented either by our FESPA members or administration. Our conversations were so very positive and collaborative throughout the entire process, and I believe that we may have completed this process in record time. It was just a quick process as we were able to collaborate and come together. Administration recommends that the board approve the closure document that is being presented today.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, board? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We will take a quick break to sign the FESPA closure documents. Okay. Board, I would like a motion to approve the Teamsters closure document as presented. Ms. Simpkins.
Thank you. I also just want to say a big thank you to our Teamsters members. We opened this year for salary only as we negotiated, and again, our conversations were very positive and collaborative, and we completed our negotiations in the matter of hours. It was great collaborating with this team of folks to come together, and the Teamsters membership overwhelmingly ratified the agreement today, so they are here today, and we recommend that you approve this closure document as well.
Thank you. Board, any questions, comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We will take a quick break now to sign the Teamsters closure documents.
didn't wear a mask today to the groundbreaking, but a lot of people did. And I know it's district policy, so everybody had to comply. Yeah.
Okay, thank you all. Board, I would like a motion to approve the 2021-2022 one-time payments and salary schedules as presented.
Mrs. Lang, these are the salary schedules that are not included in the closure documents that you've already approved this evening. Following the same structure, we are presenting these salary schedules with the included contingency language, with one exception. We are recommending an increase in salary for our cafeteria aides to be consistent with the state minimum wage.
Okay, any questions, board? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Board, I would like a motion to approve the additional support staff, FTE, for the 2021-2022 school year as presented. Ms. Simpkins.
Not a lot to add here, just that we have identified some additional students that will need services from a sign language interpreter. So we are just asking the board to approve this additional position for next school year.
Any questions, board? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Board, I would like a motion to approve the April 2021 monthly financial report as presented. Mr. Supple.
Thank you, Mrs. Lang. The only piece of information that I would add that's a little bit different, just to prep the board, we did receive notification today from MSBA. We participate in a natural gas purchasing consortium. It's been a while, but there was a major interruption in the natural gas supply as a result of extremely cold weather that disrupted services. If you've followed the national news, you can tell that people have been surprised by gigantic bills. We were notified today that the consortium on our behalf has been negotiating to as best they can to reduce the billing that we might receive for that period of time. We expect to receive that bill in the next couple of days, but anytime you receive a letter kind of prepping you to be on the lookout for something that might be 10 to 100 times greater than what you usually get, I just want to let the board know it's likely that that will be reflected. It will certainly be reflected on our financial statements before the end of the fiscal year, probably not in the May statements because we're almost done with this month, but we'll probably pay that bill in June. But I don't know yet what that looks like. You know, maybe we did a good job. It didn't use as much gas in that month as maybe other entities, but just prepping you that we may see a large increase that's just being passed on as a result of circumstances beyond our control, beyond the control of many individuals across the country who experienced exactly the same phenomenon.
Thank you.
That is a one-time only, yes.
Any other questions, board? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Board, I would like a motion to enter into an agreement with Gresdick Vending to provide beverage vending services from the district as presented. Mr. Supple?
Thank you, Mrs. Lang. I did share with the board that we provided an updated memo just that covered some additional talking points that we had not covered when we first posted this to board docs. I'll just review those with you briefly. One of the things that I would share is that we're trying to balance the desire of our staff for a certain product mix in the hopes that if there was more product in the machines that they actually appealed to them, we would increase our sales volume. If we increase our sales volume, even if our commission percentage is a little bit less, it may not have a negative impact on our sales, on our commission rate overall. The other item is that in its proposal to us, Pepsi offered to provide $13,000 annually as an in-kind donation of product. That was not something that was specifically requested in the RFP, and so Grisadec in their proposal didn't provide that because it wasn't specifically requested. But if our recommendation is approved this evening, we would certainly enter into discussions with Grisadec to see if there would be a way for us to also get some in-kind donation of product from them. So those were, I think, the two main points. That we understand that there's a difference in the commission rates for Grisadec because they are not a national bottler, but we believe that the machines having a different mix of product, items that people favor more, might increase our sales and may negate the effects of the lower commission rate that is offered by Grisadec.
Questions, board? Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Board, I'd like a motion to approve the purchases over $7,500 as presented. Mr. Supple, anything to add?
I'd be happy to answer any questions, but don't have anything specific.
Anyone have any questions? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Now we will move on to our 2022-2023 school year calendar discussion.
All right, it's that time again. We get to talk about the school year calendar. Tonight, I am excited to present to you the 22-23 school year calendar. Please remember that we recently had a change in legislation that dictates the start of our school year. So the 22-23 school year may not start before August 22nd. And the proposed calendar does list this date as the first day of school. I did want to share with you a little bit about our practice and how the calendar was created and provided for input. So our practice is to convene a large calendar committee when there is any significant change required to the calendar. When creating the 2021 and 21-22 school year calendar, a committee was formed as we worked through setting a new start date based on the legislation we just saw. The 22-23 calendar follows the exact same format with just minor tweaks to the dates. And so therefore we did not convene a large calendar committee for this particular school year calendar. After creating a draft of the calendar, administration sought input from the FHEA president, a change in the placement of the meeting workday in January, and a request to revise the 21-22 calendar did result from this collaboration, and both of those changes are included in our presentation tonight. And finally, just following our past practice, a survey was conducted of staff and community to gather input before finalizing our calendar for the presentation. Each year, we provide just the calendar parameters. It's an information sheet with the calendar survey to help stakeholders understand all of the things we have to consider and what drives our calendar each year. There's not a lot of flexibility in our calendar when you think of all of these things that go into the creation of the calendar. So this full information sheet was provided to staff and community through our survey and is also on board docs if you'd like to take a look at it. And then the survey is created just in an effort to offer some explanation and gather input from our staff and our community. So let's talk about the big ideas in 22-23. The calendar is very similar to what we're living this year and will live next year with some very minor tweaks. Our returning teachers will not come back to work until August 15th, and students will return on August 22nd. The recommended calendar allows for the best distribution of days so that our quarters and semesters are as equal as possible. So we'll have 84 days in first semester, 85 in second semester, and the quarters are broken up 43, 41, 42, and 43 days. Fall break is included. It is a 5-day break and is attached to a professional development day, We try to add those professional development days to other days off so that we can eliminate the intermittent days off throughout the school year. Election days, district leaders continue to have these days as non-student contact days. It really does allow us to provide safety for our students as community members are coming into our buildings for voting. It allows us to make sure that there's adequate parking and allows us to make sure that the displacement of students from maybe the PE, the gyms, or the common spaces doesn't affect instruction. Winter break is also included and is scheduled for 8 weekdays. The end of first semester is after Christmas in this calendar. It will end on January 12th, but students will have an opportunity to come back to school and review content before they take finals on January 11th and 12th. Our spring break is included, and it is the same as our region. This allows for countywide programs to have the same spring break, and those families that have maybe 2 working parents in 2 different districts can enjoy the same spring break, or maybe a family member that works in one district has students in another, they can enjoy the same spring break together. And the end of the school year will be before Memorial Day, as long as there are no snow days. Our high schools will set an earlier date for seniors due to graduation. Our snow days are accounted for and are placed at the end of the school year, but we do know that a snow day committee will be coming together soon to talk a little bit about how our district handles snow days and consider some virtual options, so that may change as we move forward. And then our professional development days, our contract with our teachers calls for 6 days, and it is really best practice to spread those out and allow our teachers to practice what they learned, so they are spread out throughout our calendar. I will say that it is also a great recruiting tool when we are talking with new teachers to talk a little bit about the professional development that our district provides. These are the results of our surveys, staff and community. You can see that 84% of staff and 85% of the community responded in either a neutral, satisfied, or very satisfied manner as they looked at the calendar. We did have fewer responses this year from our community than in the past, but our survey link was communicated in the district digest. And we also provided information to our buildings and asked them to include that in their building e-news. We also extended the survey window and did a final social media push the week of May 3rd just to seek additional input from our community. We know that a shorter first week is preferred, and we did provide some options in the survey that included pushing back the start of school to a Tuesday. That was really the best of the options that we could provide with the parameters that were given. So we provided 3 options in the survey. One was to keep the draft as is, which meant that students started school on Monday, August 22nd. We started winter break on Thursday, December 22nd, and the last planned school day was going to stay Friday, May 26th. And you can see that that was overwhelmingly the most popular choice. The other options allowed us to start on a Tuesday and maybe start winter break a little bit later, or start on that Tuesday, keep winter break, and have the last day of school be after Memorial Day. So overwhelmingly, our staff and our community asked us to keep the calendar as is in the draft. As we looked at the comments throughout the survey, patrons had an opportunity to kind of talk to each different category in the calendar. And for our community, these were the 3 most popular commented areas. Fall break, it continues to be an area that receives many, many comments. And in the past, it ranges from remove it altogether to I wish it was a whole lot longer. There are many differing opinions about this break, but overall, it continues that a majority of respondents indicate that they would like that break to continue. With the start of the school year in late August, snow days added to the end of the school year could mean that students are in attendance through June 10th. And there were many comments asking the district to consider virtual learning on snow days, maybe incorporating the snow days into the calendar or excusing the days altogether. And as I said, this fall we'll convene a committee to just determine how we might use virtual options for snow days. We'll ask FHEA, teachers, administrators, content leaders, and others just to come help us review our practice and make decisions on how best to move forward. And then as with fall break, comments around winter break are also very split. Some respondents indicate that they appreciate the shorter break at this time, while others express concern that winter break is too short. But again, most of the comments in this area were positive from our community. Moving on to our staff survey, these were the 3 areas of most commented areas. And really the comments around the snow makeup days and fall break were very similar to that of our community, but our staff focused a lot on the start of the school year. And most just shared frustration with legislation and the loss of local control to setting our calendars the way that we would like to. Many staff members mentioned that that earlier start date was advantageous and liked what our calendars used to look like. They really do appreciate a shorter start to that first week. And some mentioned that starting on a Monday is fine, so it is a little bit of a split topic in that area. Both copies of our survey are on board docs, so if you'd like to go through all of the comments from our community and staff, that information is available for you. And I just want to share with you that when we bring this recommendation forward to you for a vote at our next board meeting, we'll also be asking you to consider a revision of the 21-22 calendar, so next year's school calendar. As we are living the 2021 calendar, we made a revision to move the teacher meeting and work day that was originally scheduled connected to winter break on January 4th to January 22nd per our teachers' requests. That allowed them to have that meeting and work day at the end of the semester rather than having it when they returned from winter break. So when we created the 22-23 calendar, it is being presented to be consistent with this change after the collaboration with our FHA president. So in an effort to provide consistency, we'll be asking you to consider a change in next year's calendar to move that meeting and work day for the 21-22 school year. It would move from January 3rd to January 14th. January 3rd would become a student contact day, shortening winter break for students by 1 day. January 14th would become the meeting workday for teachers and would become a non-student contact day, and students would have a 4-day weekend, because that is the Friday before Martin Luther King Day. So we'll bring that motion with the approval of the 22-23 calendar to you at our next meeting. And I'm happy just to answer any questions that you have about the creation of the calendar or what it might mean for our students.
Any questions, comments, board?
In reading through the 86 pages of comments, our staff, our parents are very concerned about their vacations. That's what I got out of it. So thank you.
Any other comments, questions?
I know that this year we had an issue with some of our staff working on Good Friday. That's not part of the calendar because of the fact that Easter changes. That's not an issue for the next 2 years, correct?
Correct. It will not be, staff and students will not be in attendance for Good Friday, this calendar that we will follow, as well as it is not recommended in the next calendar. That was really a one-year situation due to how the calendar fell with the election day.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, anyone else? All right, thank you, Ms. Simpkins. Moving on to our budget work session. Mr. Supple?
Thank you, Mrs. Lang. We're going to take a look at the preliminary budget for fiscal year 22. This is an overview of our revenues by fund and expenditures by fund. This takes a look at all of our funds. There are a couple of things that I would call attention to here. And the first of that would be that in the revised budget, you can see that for the capital projects and bond fund, on the revenue side, there was that large influx of over $100 million, and that is related to the sale of our first tranche of Proposition S bonds that took place in September of 2020. So as you look at the preliminary budget for next year, that revenue is not included, but because it's such a large number, I wanted to make sure that we spoke about that a little bit tonight. And then corresponding to that would be the expenditure side of things. So if you look at the capital projects and bond fund expenditures, you can see that it follows a fairly typical pattern for 2021, but in 2021-22, we see a significant increase, and those are the projected expenditures related to Proposition S. So we received the revenue in fiscal year 21, and we're going to begin to have a major expenditure beginning in fiscal year 22. So we have the revenue, it's just that the variances between those fiscal years are fairly significant. I just wanted to make sure that I had an opportunity to speak to those. Next, we're going to take a look at revenues. This is, again, all funds, revenues by source and expenditures by object. The one thing that I would draw attention to here is it presented in a little different format, but the same concept. You can see that in fiscal year 21, we had that $100 million of revenue related to the sale of the Proposition S bonds, and so that's not reflected in fiscal year 22. And then similarly, in the capital outlay, this is, again, expenditures by object. You can see that fairly typical pattern of expenditures for fiscal year 21, but we have that large increase in fiscal year 22, and those are the planned Proposition S expenditures. Again, the revenue was received in fiscal year 21. The expenditures will occur beginning in a significant fashion in fiscal year 22. Here we're looking at just our operating funds. We'd looked previously at all of our funds, and this is just the operating funds. What I would draw the board's attention to here is that we are projecting a $3.6 million deficit in the operating funds, so we have made significant headway in closing the revenue and expenditure gap. We benefited from the fact that fiscal year 22 is a reassessment year, so we get our normal increase in property tax revenue that comes every other year as a result of the reassessment process. So that played into it. And we do have continuing efforts to contain our expenditures. A couple of things that I would point out would be that we had in fiscal year 22, you can see that we are planning, if you take a look at federal revenue, in fiscal year 21, that was about $7.7 million. In fiscal year 22, that goes up to $11.7 million. That's a combination of factors. We are expecting to make a request for some of the federal stimulus dollars that have been approved, so that revenue is budgeted and shows up as a federal revenue source. That's offset to a little bit, to a degree, by the fact that our Title I revenue is decreasing because our census poverty numbers changed, and so it moved us to a different category for funding, and we'll receive less Title I revenue than we have in prior years. And then on the expenditure side, again, you can see that in the purchase services line item, there's a large increase between fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 22. Again, we've made plans that we will apply for some of the federal stimulus money that has been allocated to Francis Howell. Some of that will be directed to salaries, but some of that has not yet been exactly determined how we might use that. So the expenditure increase that you see there is kind of a placeholder that we put in so that We have accounted for not only the revenue on the revenue side, but expenditures to account for the utilization of those one-time federal stimulus dollars. So in terms of the overall deficit, I would say this is essentially a wash because the amount of revenue that we're receiving is offset by the amount of expenditures we put in. So if we apply for less federal stimulus dollars, we'll spend less money. So it's not going to have a significant impact on the budget in terms of the overall deficit. So just some items of note. As I mentioned, fiscal year 22 is a reassessment year, so we are projecting an increase in our current taxes revenue. We're also projecting that our sales tax revenue will increase. It's been a bright spot, I've mentioned it in our financial statements, that we had anticipated at the beginning of the year to see a sharper decline in our sales tax revenue as a result of the economy being impacted by COVID-19. But it turns out that one of the major factors that drives Proposition C sales tax revenue is food taxes. And a lot of people were staying at home, so they're buying more groceries, and we had a better than expected sales tax revenue year for fiscal year 21. We do expect that we'll continue to see some growth in our sales tax revenue next year. As I shared with the board for this year, our financial institutions tax came in far lower than what had been budgeted. We had budgeted at the higher level based on prior year's experience, and now that has changed. So next year's budget is budgeted at the amount of revenue that we received this year, not what we have received in previous years. So that's a reduction of about $1.4 million. And then our interest earnings. This year, our budget was around $600,000, a little over that. We are not going to be able to make that because even after we adopted the budget, interest rates were decreased even further. We also have less fund balance to invest over the period of time that those monies are available to us. So our interest earnings are going to be a little bit less than $20,000. So again, if you take a look at budget to budget, that's a loss of about $1.6 million. So even though we're seeing an increase in current taxes revenue and an increase in our sales tax revenue, that's offset by the decreases that we're projecting both in the financial institutions tax and in our interest earnings. Our state revenue shows that we'll see about $1 million increase, but that's related to our estimate of what we will receive for the early childhood special education program. That revenue estimate is based on prior year expenditures because that's how we are reimbursed. So we'll be reimbursed in fiscal year 22 for the expenditures we made in fiscal year 21. And again, the ECSE revenue is a combination of state and federal sources, so there may be a change in the mix of how that revenue is distributed between state and federal sources, but that increase there is really related to ECSE and is offsetting expenditures that have already been made. Other than that, our formula revenue is relatively flat. The legislature approved only $8.5 million increase in the funding for the foundation formula, and that only allowed things to stay essentially flat. So we're not going to see anything there. The budget, again, does include $6 million in federal stimulus revenue. Again, some of that would be used to offset potential salary increases, those one-time payments that have been discussed. And some of it would be allocated potentially to other types of uses. We haven't determined yet exactly what those might be, but there's a placeholder within the budget so that we can allocate those to projects once it's determined what that money would be used for. And again, Title I revenue is decreasing by about $1 million due to the change in our census poverty calculation. So the increase isn't of the federal revenue isn't immediately obvious because it's offset to some degree by the loss of the Title I revenue. On the expenditure side, our salaries do reflect the reduction of FTE that was approved in the staffing plan. But that is offset by the allocation of those one-time stipend payments to staff that'll be funded with the federal stimulus dollars. We do see on the benefit side that we would see our expenditures for medical insurance increase by about $1 million. That just reflects the normal growth that we would see in the cost of providing those insurance benefits to our staff. We just concluded our discussions with our employee insurance committee, and our consultant provided us with a recommendation about what was necessary to maintain the appropriate level of funding for our self-funded program, and that is just about $1 million. The retirement and payroll taxes that are reflected in the budget do include the decreases in FTE, but there will be some additional payments that are related to the one-time stipends. So those stipend payments are subject to retirement contributions and other payroll taxes. So the decrease is not, again, completely apparent because it's offset by some increases in those areas related to the one-time payments. In purchase services, again, we placed $3 million just as a placeholder for possible expenditures that would be funded with federal stimulus dollars. And in supplies, our overall decrease in expenditures from, we can see that our expenditures have actually decreased on an overall level from the prior year's budget. So I want to, it's just a couple things that I would point out. Fiscal year 21, we projected that at this time last year that we would have a $12.9 million deficit this fiscal year. Taking a look at how we have progressed through the fiscal year so far, I believe that we'll see our deficit closer to 5.1 million. So what are the reasons for that? Well, we've had stronger than expected sales tax and property tax revenue this year. We did have planned reductions, and we've been very cautious about spending this year, even for items that had been previously included in the budget. And then we always have some underspending, and so that has contributed to it as well. So you can see that we are expecting to see a little bit more revenue than what was budgeted, and our expenditures will be less than budgeted. So that leaves us with a $5.1 million projected deficit, which means that our ending fund balance will be about 14%. So we're almost within meeting the bottom level of the board policy relative to where fund balances should be. If we take a look at fiscal year 22, again, we're projecting that we would see a $3.6 million deficit for next year. And if you think about the dynamics that I just talked about, that it's likely that we'll see some revenue a little better than what had been budgeted, and our expenditures will likely come in less than budgeted. So I don't know that that would be the exact ending deficit when we get to this time next year. But were it to work out that way, our fund balance would be just under 11%. Actually, I'm going to, before I move on, I just would take this time to address something that came up earlier tonight. So in this slide, you can see that we do every year budget a transfer to the Capital Projects Fund that's indicated on this slide. You can see the $4 million in fiscal year 21 and the $2 million in fiscal year 22. So I know this will be an ongoing conversation as we move forward with Proposition S projects, but it's important to Again, just give some time to reiterate the reasons why that exists. So we have 28 different facilities that we're responsible for, almost 3 million square feet. And there are a lot of things that need to be taken care of on an annual basis. Proposition S identified a very specific list of projects that will be completed. And we were going to work very hard to get all of that work done. But in addition to that, there are things that just happen every year in maintaining a 3 million square feet of physical plant. We have to replace boilers. We have flooring that wears out, either carpet or tile that needs to be replaced. There are ADA modifications that need to be made. There are going to be roof repairs that need to be made. In addition to those capital type expenditures, which are regular capital expenditures that the district incurs every year that are not Proposition S projects, we will need to continue to fund those. We also have expenditures out of the capital fund that are related to purchases of instructional administrative technology, so those are reflected in there, as well as our bus leases. So we budget, we allocate a certain percentage of our overall operating tax levy to the capital projects fund. But because once money goes into the capital projects fund, it can only be spent on capital projects, we're conservative in the allocation of levy to the capital projects fund. And by budgeting the transfer, we're able to move over only the amount necessary to cover the projects that have been completed. That way, we retain the greatest amount of flexibility over the tax revenues that we receive. So again, just to reiterate a couple things. We are going to continue to have regular operating capital needs that will have to be completed even as we work through the Proposition S projects. We have a very specific list of projects for Proposition S, and then in addition to that, we have a lot of things that are just regular maintenance items that we'll have to take care of. So we will continue to be spending money on those maintenance items even as we're implementing Proposition S. And the other thing is we try to maintain the greatest flexibility for our levy revenue, and by placing some of that in the capital projects fund and then transferring the balance, we're able to maintain the greatest amount of flexibility with those funds. This is our debt service fund. We have very strong reserves within debt service. Very glad to be in that position. So we can, we do have sufficient funds to meet our increased principal and interest payments. One of the great things about Proposition S is that even though it was the largest bond issue, school district bond issue approved in the state of Missouri, we were able to do that without increasing our debt service levy. So we've already issued $100 million worth of bonds. We have $144 million of authority. Those will be issued in upcoming years. Having a strong reserve allows us to ensure that we can issue those additional bonds without having to increase our debt service levy. So I just wanted to share with the board that we are on track to be able to issue the additional bonds, and this strong ending balance in our debt service fund will allow us the flexibility to do that. And this is just a graphic representation of what's happening with our debt service. So the light-colored bars that tend to be at the top of this graph, those are all related to Proposition S, the 2020 bonds that were just issued. The other colors are the existing debt that was there before we did that issue in 2020. So you can see that the amount of revenue necessary to defease those bonds goes down year by year by year. So we do have a lot of flexibility within our debt levy. You can see that we're able to support somewhere around $16 million a year in debt service payments. And as we get out to 2026, we're well below that level. That gives us the latitude to issue additional bonds that will fill in those spaces. so that we continue to have a somewhat stable level of debt payment every year, and we can do that without having to raise our debt service levy. So this is just a visual representation of what our current debt obligations are, and you can see how the 2020 bonds have been structured across the period of the 20 years until we get to 2040, when those would finally be paid off. And then this just talks about our bonding capacity. So for fiscal year 22, you can see that at the end of the year, our debt would be at about $165 million. So our debt to assessed value is 5.36%. School districts by statute are subject to having debt ratio less than 15% of their assessed valuation. So we're well below that level, and you can, as you look at the historical figures, you can see that we're right in line with where it was. In fiscal year 20, prior to issuing the Series 2020 bonds, we'd actually gotten down to around 3%. So we had a lot of capability to issue bonds within, based on our assessed valuation. So this is just a picture of the Capital Projects Fund budget. Again, we have the typical amount of revenue that's budgeted from the 6 cents that we allocate from our levy into the Capital Projects Fund. And again, the expenditures for Proposition S projects are reflected on the expenditure side there. But those, again, are offset by the revenue that we received in fiscal year 21. This is just a listing of the capital projects that are typically funded. Again, you can see here what makes those up. These are not bond issue projects. These are just the normal updates. We budget as if all these projects would be completed within a particular fiscal year, but we know because of the way that the summer falls, some of those projects can't be completed until school is out, and we may not be able to complete everything before the June 30th. And so sometimes these projects, even though they're budgeted this year, they get paid over 2 fiscal years. But again, it gives you an idea of what we're talking about. Flooring, stairwell updates, painting, additions to our security systems. We need to update fire panels, some roofing, some fencing. These are all the normal projects that a school district needs to undertake on a regular basis. And again, these are not Proposition S projects. It's just a regular work that takes place. You can see the technology expenditures listed there as well. In our Nutrition Services Fund, we do expect that we will generate a small surplus next year. The USDA has authorized continuation of the seamless serving option, which allows us to offer free meals to all students for the entirety of the 2021-2022 school year. So we're very happy about that. We've seen an increase in the participation in our school lunch program as a result of that, and we expect that that will continue as we move forward. Any of the funds that are generated over and above the revenue that we need to operate the program are invested back into the program. So we make improvements to our facilities. We buy new ovens and stoves and refrigerators. We buy new cafeteria tables and et cetera. So all of the resources that are generated are used in service of the program, either by providing meals for the students or improving the cafeteria themselves. I'm happy to share that we are projecting that the Facilities Usage Fund is going to actually be operating in the black next year. So we have adopted a new reservation system, Facilitron, that's increased our ability to market our facilities to the general public. It not only makes it easier for them to reserve their spots, but it requires them to make payment at the time of reservation. And so we've had a much higher success in getting the fees collected for facilities rental. So it's certainly not the end point of where we want to be, but to begin to see the positive turnaround there is certainly a benefit. Our tuition-based funds, that's our vacation station and preschool program. We should see an increase in enrollments in fiscal year 22. You know, this program, more than others perhaps, was affected by COVID and a decrease in enrollment. While we didn't really see a drop-off of students attending our schools, whether virtually or in person, we did see a decline in the number of students who enrolled in our after-school programs and our preschool program. We have decreased our revenue projections for next year. We had typically budgeted at a higher level. We have revised those downward for next year. We have continued to budget, although we've made some reductions in our expenditures overall, we continue to budget our expenditures assuming full enrollments. So to the extent that those programs are not fully enrolled, we may not need as much staffing as is included in the budget, and of course those dollars would not be spent. Those positions are only hired as they're supported by the enrollment of students. But we do expect that the fund would not be able to turn a profit next year. You know, the optimistic side would be that enrollment increases are stronger than we expected, which would lead to an increase in our revenue, and it would be distributed in such a way that we might be able to mitigate our expenditures, our staffing a little bit, and it could improve that picture. But I just wanted to be honest that we continue to, that'll take a while to build that program back after people have been away from the vacation station and preschool programs. So just in summary, we've made some substantial progress towards our deficit reduction, but there's a lot of work that remains to be done yet. We know that we're receiving some federal stimulus dollars, but those are one-time revenues, and they must be used judiciously so that we don't assign them to recurring expenditures. Our state revenue growth is impacted by our enrollments, but also by legislative initiatives, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. We've had some limited salary increases for fiscal year 22, and I think we can all understand that that just creates pressure for larger increases in future years. So I understand that that is out there. And then we just need to continue to work on ways to limit the amount of growth in expenditures for our medical insurance program. We've got a great program for our staff, but the expenditures continue to increase year after year, and it is a choice that we have to make then not to dedicate those resources in other areas, whether that's for salary increases or for expenditures for other programs and services. And then I just want to talk just briefly about legislation. So there were some efforts this year to limit property tax revenue. One of those was to eliminate property taxes, to graduate out the property taxes on personal property. Personal property in Francis Howell School District generates a little over $16 million a year for us. So elimination of the personal property tax revenue would be a significant impact for us. And while the legislative effort this year was not successful, this year wasn't the first time that that issue was discussed. It was the first time that it got close to reality. I can anticipate that the proponents will bring that back for discussion again. And I just want to know that that is a significant threat to our ability to adequately fund our programs. The other issue that was discussed and gained a little less traction this year, but again, I imagine it will be brought back up, will be an artificial cap placed on our reassessment growth. So again, reminding the board, we had this conversation at the time that the levy is approved in September, but the Hancock Amendment requires that as our assessed value increases, we have to adjust our tax rate so that we only capture a CPI level of growth on reassessment. So if our reassessment goes up 7%, which is what it did this year, we have to roll our rate back. So if you remember in April when I presented the projected tax liability notice, we had about a 15% decrease in our tax rate, a 15-cent decrease in our tax rate, so that we're only capturing the CPI growth, which I estimated to be about 2.3%. What the legislative initiatives have suggested is that they place some kind of an artificial cap, meaning that assessed value could never grow by more than the number that was used this year was 5%, that it could never grow by more than 5%. Or if it did grow at a level higher than that, there was a whole series of things that the assessors would need to do to defend that level. And although St. Charles County has an excellent team of assessors that work for the county, they would be overburdened by the requirements, and there would be many places across the state that simply don't have the personnel to do the things that would be required. The other thing in addition to limiting our growth, because first of all, the Hancock Amendment takes care of much of that, so I'm not sure what the effort is, but the other piece is that it really has a direct impact on our ability to fund our debt program. So as our assessed value increases, that has a extremely beneficial impact on our debt service. And the projections of us being able to issue all of those bonds without having to increase our debt service levy were based on a continued ability to grow our assessed value. If there's an artificial cap placed on that, it might at some point in the future cause us to be in a place where we either can't issue debt or we would need to increase our debt levy in order to generate sufficient revenue to make the principal and interest payments. So I think these are some pretty significant things that have direct impact on the operations, not only of Francis Howell, but of districts across the state. And I think that there will be continued traction around these items as we move forward. The other initiatives that took place this year are limits on the state's general revenue growth. So Missouri finally joined the 49 other states by approving a tax on internet sales, so that's going to happen. But that was done in conjunction with a reduction in the state's income tax rate. And so the idea was that you're going to be paying taxes on internet sales, but we're going to give you a reduction on your income tax, and so it's not really a tax increase. Well, sales taxes generally benefit municipalities. School districts don't charge sales tax. The sales tax that we receive is a statewide sales tax that's applied, but we don't personally charge a sales tax the way that a city like St. Peter's or O'Fallon might. And so we don't really benefit from the internet sales tax being approved. We're actually harmed because as a result of it getting approved, they reduce the income tax rate, and so people would be paying less income tax. Income tax is about 65 to 70% of the state's general revenue. The state's general revenue is what funds K-12 schools. So continued pressure to reduce those income tax rates is going to have a negative effect on the state's ability to fund us. And then this year, finally crossing the finish line, was a voucher program. It's called an educational scholarship program, but essentially it's using public dollars in the form of tax credits to allow people to send their children to private schools. And again, this program is going to divert the state's general revenue through reductions, income tax rebates that individuals would be able to claim for their donations to these educational scholarship programs. Just decreases the state's general revenue. The state's general revenue is what funds K-12 education. And again, a continued pressure to find the resources to appropriately fund K-12 spending for K-12 at the state level. I'd be happy to answer any questions the board might have.
Thank you, Mr. Supple. Any questions, board? I have one I would like to, thank you for that presentation. That was a lot of information. And I want to just clarify one thing again. We move funds to our capital funds to cover the day-to-day maintenance expenses, regardless of having bond money in there, correct?
That is correct. And the amount that's transferred is only the amount that's necessary to cover the expenditures that actually occurred. So if you look historically over a period of time, there are some years when we've transferred funds and some years when we have not, even though we budgeted for that to happen every year. But yes,
Thank you.
it's
I just
not
wanted to
related
make
to
sure
bond expenditures at all.
Board?
Mr. Supple, I know you mentioned that at the end there, you talked about the different legislation. We know that the House and the Senate passed the tax credit bill. Have you taken that into account at all? I know the governor hasn't signed it yet, but have you taken that into account at all with next year's budget, that we might be losing some of our enrollment?
I have not, because it's difficult to predict exactly how many. I think we'll have to see the program in operation before we have a real understanding. It would be my hope that community members in Francis Howell would recognize the tremendous value that they have in their own public schools. If you hear the legislators talk about these programs, they tend to speak about districts other than the ones that they represent that are evidence of why this would be necessary. So my hope would be it would have a very minimal impact, but I don't know until the program's actually in operation what that would be. So that's not factored in at all for fiscal year 22. But again, the legislation wouldn't be effective until August 28th. And so the likelihood is that it'd be at least a year before we would even have any indication of what that might look like.
Thank you.
Two questions, Kevin. Title I funds, you brought up there will be a reduction. Does that mean we may lose Title I schools, or just the schools that are Title I presently will have less funds distributed?
It doesn't change the schools that qualify. We just have less money to service those schools.
And second question is, have we heard yet from the American Rescue Plan? I think that's the latest one. What type of funds we might be getting, or is it still? Yeah.
No, we've received word that we believe that next week, probably by the end of next week, we're supposed to have some information from DESE, but that's our latest. So we don't have confirmation yet. We certainly have some indication, and we're able to make some mental notes about what we think is going to happen. But unlike the other federal stimulus dollars, we have not received our official allocation.
And that's based on free or reduced lunch, basically.
It's distributed based on the Title I formula, which takes into account census poverty, which is free and reduced lunch is an indicator of that, but it's not strictly free and reduced lunch.
Thank you. Anyone else, board? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Supple.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now we will move on to an inclusion and equity update from Dr. Hoven.
Why, thank you. So at our last meeting, we got to where we were looking at our last parts of our equity audit.
We actually had just lots of conversation about where we are with our work this year and what our vision for moving forward looks like. So what we have done is set up meetings twice a month throughout the summer in an effort to make sure we end the summer with recommendations for actions ready to move forward. So that could look like actions we bring directly to the board as recommendations. It could look like actions that form teams next year to do the work. So depending on what those recommendations look like, whether they'll come straight to the board or they could form committees that will encompass lots of stakeholders, lots of district people, community people, in order to set that work going forward. So we will meet a number of times this summer just to take the work from this audit and really shape it into form so that we can make those recommendations to move forward.
Thank you, Dr. Hoven. Superintendent comments?
Yes,
Dr.
also
Hoven.
me. First off, I just want to say how proud I am of everyone who had a hand in getting this room ready for this meeting. It's relatively easy to say, hey, we should move a meeting to a new location. It's another thing to move it to a location that wasn't necessarily set up for this type of meeting, for live streaming, the cameras, the audio, the video, the physical setup. So there's a lot of people behind the scenes who did a lot of great work. Some of them are here tonight to make this room ready for this. So kind of magic to show up and see it looking like this, but it took a lot of work behind the scenes. So I just want to say I appreciate very much those efforts. The other thing I want to talk about echoes what we covered earlier and just how exciting it was to be at the groundbreaking this morning. You know, thinking back to all of the years that led to the bond issue being passed, the incredible, overwhelming support from our community for that bond issue to pass, a year's worth of planning, design. You heard from SM Wilson tonight, you heard from Honer, you heard from John Klein, thinking of all of the committee work, Jeremy Bettler, all of the team that's been together to help get us to where we are. Just the incredible celebration it is. It's been such a hard year in so many ways. And to be able to just spend the morning looking at that bright future that's in place for our kids, our families, our staff, and just want to continue to celebrate that we're actually getting those tangible steps ready to move forward.
Great, thank you. Board, any comments or requests? It's quiet tonight. Okay, saying that, board, I would like a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. Have a good evening, everyone.